Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
The battles that count aren't the ones for gold medals. The struggles within yourself, the invisible battles inside all of us, that's where it's at.
A very heartfelt morning to everyone present here. I, Divyanshi Sharma,
And I, Prisha Bansal,
are here to welcome you all to the relevance of United Nations in the context of Talibanization of Afghanistan and ensuing humanitarian and economic crisis. It is our extreme honor to have with us Honorable Vice Chancellor, Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. M.P. Kaushik, well-acclaimed Chief Guest, Dr. Sagi Setu, HOI, Amity Law School, Amity University, Dubai, Major General Rajendra Kumar, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Vishisht Seva Medal, Director, Amity Law School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Professor Dr. Rakhi Singh Chauhan, HOD, Amity Law School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Deans, Registrar AUMP, Directors, all the HOIs, HODs, faculty members, along with participants and dearest audience. We feel immense pleasure to have you all as a part of this competition.
light symbolizes divinity, purity, wisdom, and knowledge. The manifestation of such positive aspects of life will surely help us move forward in our careers and personal lives. And with these lines, I would like to invite all the dignitaries to kindly light the lamp before Ma Saraswati.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना.
Leaders become great, not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. And our Honorable Vice Chancellor is a perfect example of the same. Lieutenant General V.K. Sharma, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, is an alumnus of the erstwhile King George School, now called the Military School, located at Sheel, Shimla. He joined the boarding school at the age of 10 years and passed his All India Higher Secondary Examination in 1968. Therefore, he joined the prestigious National Defence Academy and passed out as a permanent commissioned army officer from the Indian Military Academy in 1972. He was granted the President's Commission in the course of signals of the Indian Army, which he served with the distinction for almost 40 years. During his service, he held several command and staff appointments and participated in Operation Rakshak and Operation Vijay, Kargil War. He almost served for 7 years in the Jammu and Kashmir Valley in Srinagar in the ranks of captain, colonel, and brigadier. Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir has also been an excellent academician in addition to being a military leader. He did his BE in Electronics and Communication Engineering from College of Military Engineers in Pune and Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, MCTE, Masters of Engineering from Pune University and Master of Management Studies from Osmania University, all in first class with honors, standing first in the order of merit of all programs. He has also been an instructor at the Institute of Armament Technology, IAT, Girinagar, Pune, which has now been redesigned as the Defense Institute of Armament Technology, DIAT. He retired after 40 years of distinguished military service as the commandant of his alma mater, the Military College of Telecommunication Engineering, MCTE, located at Mau, Madhya Pradesh, which is a center of excellence in electronics and communication, information technology, and cyber warfare. During his service in the army, he has to travel to almost every nook and corner of the country and also headed military delegations to France, Germany, and USA. For his meritorious service to the nation, he was awarded the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal by the Honorable President of India on 26 January 2011. He has also held the appointment of Colonel Commandant of the Corps of Signals for a period of almost 4 years. He is presently the Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, Gwalior. Under his able leadership, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh has seen exponential growth and has been adjudged among the best private universities in Madhya Pradesh by CMAI and NIRF. Most recently, the university has been ranked the best private university in Madhya Pradesh and among the top 25 private universities in India by India Today in 2021. He has also been instrumental in introducing a host of best practices aimed at fostering academic excellence in the university. I would like to request you, sir, to kindly enlighten the audience with the valuable words of wisdom. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, Divanshi. General Rajendra Kumar, the Director of MT Law School, Dr. Rakesh Singh Chauhan, Dr. Sagi Geeta Sethu, who is joined from Dubai, Dr. Rajesh Jain, all the HOIs, HODs, panelists, and the participants who have joined from different parts of the world. The topic is very relevant in today's context. Now that we are seeing the war between Russia and Ukraine, which is ongoing right now at this very moment, relevance of United Nations in the context of Talibanization of Afghanistan and ensuing humanitarian and economic crisis. As long as human beings have the power for lust, the power to be superior over others, the wish to dominate others, wish to be the world leaders, wish to be more progressive, wish to be more competitive, war shall continue. After the First World War, in 1919, the League of Nations came into being. The League of Nations had a similar role as the United Nations today, the primary role being prevention of war, security for all countries, and to ensure development of all countries. That was the role of the United Nations. But we know that role could not be fulfilled because the Second World War took place. And after the end of the Second World War, in 1945, the United Nations came into being with 51 founding members who were a part of the initial UNO when it was formulated. Today, it has 193 nations who have legally signed to be the members of United Nations. In the world, there are 195 countries. There are only 2 countries who are not members of UNO. The rest of the whole world is a member of United Nations. Now, what are the functions of United Nations? The first and foremost is maintaining international peace and security. That is the first mandate that the UN has got. But maintaining international peace and security with what? And who are the people in the United Nations who will ensure that this is maintained? That is the Security Council. The Security Council, as you all know, has got 5 permanent members with a veto power. For United Nations to take any military action, all these 5 have to be in sync. But whereas the national interests of all 5 are quite different. their own ideas are quite different. Their ways of looking at power are different. Their ideologies with regard to economic development and human rights are quite different. Then to expect that all of them will come together and ensure international peace is quite a wide dream. After the UNO was formed, as many as more than 135 wars have taken place between 1945 and today. As the human beings are becoming more aware, as the mankind is more into the social media, the value of human lives is being realized more because the media is active and the social media is more active. Today, a death taking place, it is known within minutes and hours through social media, through the news networks, and reactions come in. Whether the reactions are only through conveying ideas or physical reactions by displaying solidarity or displaying violence, all this happens. Earlier, by signing, you could send forces to defend other countries and you could get your men killed for some other nation. Today, the situation is quite different. People are asking, why should American blood be split in Afghanistan? Why should American people die in Iraq? With those kind of questions, the men or people in power in America had to decide that this shall not happen. Americans will fight for themselves. They will not fight for anybody else. That was the reason that they pulled out of Afghanistan and there was a vacuum. When there was a vacuum, it had to be filled, and vacuum gets filled earliest by those who are capable of filling it fastest. The Taliban came in, which was waiting for America to leave. They came in and took over sooner than America expected it to happen. While America was giving about a week's time, but within few days, the Taliban took over entire Afghanistan. Taliban has got its own agenda, its own rules, its own law, its own ideology. They believe that the dictates of Islam, fundamentalist Islam, should be followed. If you are caught stealing, your hand should be cut off. If you are involved in adultery, you should be stoned to death. Those kind of stringent punishments laid down as per Islam, which they perceive to be correct, they implement. Women are not supposed to step out of the home. It is the responsibility of the men to protect the women and cater for their security and for their financial needs. Women should not work at all. Women should not be educated. Education is the prerogative of men alone. These are the ideas on which Taliban thrives. Modern progressive women of any caste or creed or country or religion, they are aware, they are awakened, and rightly so. They want liberty, they want equality, because by mere probability, there have to be about 50% women and 50% men. You cannot imagine that 50% of the population of the world is sitting at home, not contributing at all, and expecting the other 50% men to look after them, which is not happening in the developed nations. So with this, naturally, there shall be a reward, not now, but as the awakening arises, as the education comes in, there shall be a reward. But the question is, no country wants to send its troops to defend another country. Today, no country wants to poke their nose in others' affairs by sending directly the troops. They can give help in terms of finance. They can give help by giving weapons. They can give help by giving moral support, by saying that we stand with you. But nobody today is prepared to send their troops to another country to die for them. In the recent Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is now ongoing, there are 30 countries of NATO, and none of them is prepared to send their troops to Ukraine to defend. And this is a lesson for all of us. I saw a tweet somewhere that India is spending more GDP on defense than on education, by an educationist, a very high-ranking educationist. My response to that was, if you are not independent, if you cannot defend your country, what will education do? What is the use of such education that you become subservient to somebody else and your security and defense is compromised? What is the use of such liberty which will give you through education when you are yourself dominated by someone else? Security is number one. Let it be quite clear. We have to defend our own country. We have to fight our own country. If we are not going to defend Kargil, America or Russia or China, nobody is going to defend it for us. Those are the lessons to be learned. United Nations' role in Afghanistan has been to appeal to the world to come in for humanitarian aid. On 11th of January, biggest appeal for $5 billion was made by the UNO to various nations to help them. Money is flowing into Afghanistan, no doubt. But where this money is going, how it is being utilized, how these schemes of UNO are being implemented is not known, because Taliban is there. And Taliban has got its own views. It has got its own methodology to run the governments. So therefore, where this money is going, whether it is being effectively utilized for the purpose for which various nations are giving aid, is not known. Food which is being supplied, whether it is reaching the poorest of the poor in Afghanistan, is not known, because the implementation is by the local government there, which is of Taliban. The other roles of United Nations are promoting social progress, developing friendly relations amongst nations, providing better living standards, human rights, international cooperation for development, and promoting greater policy coherence in global development issues as a political forum for dialogue, conveying the major issues on the global economic agenda. And the three pillars of United Nations are human rights, peace and security, and development of people and support to them. So with all this, the actual methodology or the actual mission of the United Nations remains limited. Although they have sent a number of UN peacekeeping forces to third world countries where there have been problems, in which, of course, India's participation has been quite tremendous in UN peacekeeping forces, but it is limited to that alone. So we have got a number of good speakers who will be talking on the issue, but the fact remains that the United Nations role and also the role of other nations when it comes to the integrity of a country cannot be really depended upon. Every country, every nation has to defend and fight its own battles. You can expect support in terms of weapons, in terms of finances, in terms of moral support from international community, nothing beyond that. So with this, I wish the organizers of this seminar, in which we have received a number of papers, research papers, and there are a number of good speakers. Some of them could not join for reasons of internet not being available in those countries or for reasons beyond their control. But I'm sure the thoughts that will come out today will have impact on the thoughts of all of us. So wish you all the very best. Thank you very much and Jai Hind.
Sir, you're unmute. Sir, you're mute.
Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Keynote address was to be given by Professor Dr. Charles Reto, who is in Conflict Studies Center, Davis Bolear, University, Romania. He is staying near Ukraine border. Because of this, there is no connectivity, internet connectivity, so he is not able to join. So in his place, we requested Dr. Sagi, who is the director of MIT Law School, Dubai, to address the audience. Before that, before I request Dr. Sagi to take over, I just give a brief introduction of this topic. After the fall of Taliban, there has been a lot of violation of human rights and humanitarian law, and the country has gripped into economic crisis. Of course, UNO is taking all the steps to provide economic assistance, and $5 billion request has been made by the UNO to help Afghanistan to come out from the crisis, and all sort of help is being given by the UNO to the Afghan government. Now is being run by the Taliban to come out from the crisis and to maintain proper human rights, especially of women and children. Now, what happened there, especially because of this crisis, there is a lot of malnutrition of the children, and the children are dying because of malnutrition. Women are being tortured. All sort of things happening that we know by reading the newspaper. The point is that if the only point, if the UNO provides assistance to the government in Afghanistan, how do you know whether these things will reach the common man? The Taliban government may use those funds for their own purpose. For that, they have asked them to nurses, doctors to open their accounts, and the money will be sent to them so that they can provide medical cover to these people. Now, I don't want to go further. I request Professor Sagi to take over. Before that, I request the anchors to introduce her to the audience. Anchors, please.
Dr. Riaz Suleiman has joined today.
Yes, he joined, sir. He joined, sir.
A hearty welcome to you, Dr. Riaz. Yeah, please carry on.
Before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. These lines remind me of our esteemed guest for today, Professor Dr. Riaz Suleiman Lebe. He is a management consultant and corporate trainer. He is also an independent researcher and professor in human rights and peace studies. He is the Vice Chancellor of George Washington University of Peace, California, former Vice Chancellor Yesbud University, Zambia, former Vice Chancellor of the British American University, Florida, USA, Sri Lanka campus. Appointed as a professor for peace by the Senate of the United Nations University Global Peace USA on 18 September 2018. He has completed his MBA and DBA in Human Resource Management and MSc in International Relations. He worked in the area of management consultant, corporate trainer, and independent researcher in human rights and peace studies. He is an executive director of the Center for Peace Studies, Sri Lanka, and the Universal Management Consultancy Services. He is a former member of the Council of the Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, appointed by the University Grant of Sri Lanka. He is specialized in human security, conflict prevention, peace building, human rights, gender equality, social and economic development, natural disaster management, international solidarity network, environmental protection projects. Professor Riaz is a chartered economist, chartered human resource project manager, and a master management consultant. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Project Management and visiting professor and academic consultant of EDSA School of Sweden. Member of the advisory board of the Brawley Journal, published by the London Academic Publishing Limited, UK, and the co-editor of Bankline and Research Paper Journals. Published by the Bangladesh Institute of Professional Studies. He is a consultant and trainer for NGO management programs of the many UN partner organizations. Also, being a member of the advisory board of the Asian African Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Here, we just mentioned a few of the most remarkable and inspiring words of Professor Dr. Riaz Suleiman Lebe. We are delighted to have you with us, sir. And now, I would like to request our esteemed chief guest to kindly enlighten the audience with his valuable words and wisdom. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. Is my voice clear, the convener?
You are audible.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. The convener and the event coordinator, Major General Rajendra Kumar, the Vice Chancellor of the MD University, Professor Rakesh Singh Chauhan, Head of Department, Director, Amity Law School, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to be with you this morning at the opening of the international seminar on relevance of United Nations in the context of Talibanization of Afghanistan and ensuing humanitarian and economic crisis. On behalf of the George Washington University of Peace and the Center for Peace Studies Sri Lanka, may I extend very warm wishes to all participants in this conference. I am very grateful to address this conference. I thank you, Professor Sandeep, to recommend me to this great opportunity. Months after Taliban's takeover, Afghanistan is in crisis. Millions of people are facing starvation. The healthcare system is collapsing and wages are plummeting. The country of 38 million people heavily depended on foreign aid before the Taliban came to power in August. Now experts say it has been devastated by the international response to the hardline Islamist groups' seizure of power, holding billions of dollars in assistance and enforcing sanctions that have impeded relief work. As the freezing winter sets in Afghanistan, threatened to slip into a devastating economic and humanitarian disaster. Over the past year, ongoing pandemic, and the extreme drought, the escalation in conflict, the Taliban takeover, and the ensuing economic crisis have pushed the country to the edge of becoming the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Since the change in power 8 months ago, there has been no international recognition to the Taliban government. Development support has mostly been suspended. The country's US dollar reserves remain frozen. This means that the banking system is not functioning and the economy is in free fall, compounding the likelihood of famine arising from the most severe drought for many years. Lack of funding means government salaries are going unpaid, with a direct impact on basic services such as healthcare and education. Despite all these, international NGOs and Afghan aid have been able to reopen all their offices, bring both men and women back to work, and ramp up their emergency humanitarian assistance work to reach at-risk families across the country. In collaboration with UN, which is directing resources to some of the most threatened regions, Afghan aid and other international and national NGOs are demonstrating that the most effective way to deliver the ongoing support Afghan needs is through the United Nations and established NGOs. At the present juncture, only they have the necessary infrastructure and experience to deliver support across the beginning of 2021, Afghan aid have supported over 350,000 men, women, and children with emergency humanitarian assistance, including providing shelter, food, health, heating, and cash. With financial support from UN agencies and the generous donation of Afghan aid supporters, they are now trying to get help to those in critical need in their working areas before the winter comes. Last month, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Report issued by the Food Security and Agriculture Cluster of Afghanistan, co-led by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the UN World Food Programme, found that over half of all Afghans will face crisis or emergency level of acute food insecurity over the winter. This means that some 22.8 million people will be unable to feed themselves. It is unfortunate that many international donors have continued to suspend funding, meaning that crucial longer-term development work has not been able to continue. With the country now on the brink of famine, it is men, women, and children across the country who will suffer if the international community seeks to penalize the new government through economic sanctions. NGOs calls on the international community to urgently resume and increase both humanitarian and development aid to the country in order to avoid further catastrophe in a country that has already dealt with so much. UN officials have urged the United States and other countries to dramatically increase aid, but these governments face a dilemma now that the Taliban are in control. Any expanded assistance to Afghanistan risks the charge that it is consolidating the Taliban in power and weakening leverage of influence their behavior. Former US Ambassador to Afghanistan, Michael McKinley, writes for Foreign Affairs, human rights abuses have only grown since the Taliban takeover. They have overseen the public execution of dozens of people, an increase in threats against journalists and activists, a decline in girls attending school, and a tightening of restriction of women, among other abuses. The UN Security Council recently agreed that for 1 year, providing humanitarian assistance will not violate sanctions, but analysts say more needs to be done to address the widespread devastation. On the other hand, in Sri Lanka context, expert of the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner Michael Bachelet's latest report on Sri Lanka have been highlighted in the media. They indicate that the report is not favorable to the government. This was to be expected. A 17-page report has found the government to be deficient in several areas. The most significant is in Prevention of Terrorism Act, which became a central issue due to the European Union's warning that it expects the government to meet its international human rights commitments as a condition for continuing with the GSP Plus tax privilege. Both international human rights organizations and their local counterparts have been critical about the government's effort to amend the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The worst feature of the PTA is that it permits the government to detain any person on suspicion of terrorism, which is vaguely and broadly defined for an indefinite period of time. Among the government's amendment is provision for bail after 1 year of detention without charge. This question is whether this is adequate. 1 year is a long time to deprive a person of liberty without the presentation of charges and on mere suspicion of an ill-defined activity. There are a few hundred languishing under the PTA at present. These include young person who had a WhatsApp message they were circulating, and even the 76 years old doctor in poor health who is claimed to be the mastermind of several abortive bomb attacks. The PTA is being amended today in circumstances very different from when it was first introduced. The Prevention of Terrorism Act was introduced to the Sri Lankan legal system as a temporary law to deal with the growing armed insurrection in 1979. This point was brought out very forcefully in the Court of Appeal decision to release Hijaz Hizbullah after he was detained for nearly 2 years. In her judgment, Justice Menaka Vijayasundara noted, 4 decades have passed and the PTA has strayed far away from its historical context. The PTA, if in its application and implementation, creates a vicious cycle of abuse. The very purpose of the statute will be defeated. The preamble of the Act refers to the affirmation that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect of the rule of law, and that grievances should be redressed by constitutional measures. She added, ultimately, it is up to the legislature to ensure that the draconian elements of the law combating terrorism are dispensed with per modern day context. Until such time, it is the judiciary's duty to employ existing legal provisions and constitutional powers to interpret the same elements in the interest of justice. In another powerful statement, Justice Rohini Marasinga, chairperson of the Human Rights Commission and former judge of the Supreme Court, said, notwithstanding the amendment already suggested by the government, the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka advocates the complete abolition of the PTA. She added that the Commission believes that the offense of terrorism should be included in the penal code with a new definition for terrorism. In the face of the widespread rejections of the PTA, it will be imperative for the government to either repeal the PTA or amend it extensively with the aim of protecting the human rights of citizens, meeting the expectations of the international community, and securing the GSP Plus tariff concession. In a step in this right direction, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has directed the police not to use the PTA as a shortcut to dispense with investigation under the Criminal Procedure Code, but only if there was a clear link to terrorism. The addition of the President's directive to the preamble to the PTA and to any legislation that will replace it will severe to further strengthen the power of the judiciary to scrutinize police arrests under such laws and prevent abuses. Apart from working on the PTA and bringing it into conformity with international standards, the government needs to show progress on many other fronts. The High Commissioner's report includes the use of former and present military persons to run civilian affairs and the threats to civil society to operate free from government control. Most significantly, it notes that for the past 2 years, the government has not formulated a formal, credible new roadmap for transitional justice and accountability. In addition, there are observations about lack of progress on a proper investigation into the Easter Sunday bombing. The terminology of transitional justice has been used sparingly during the present period as it includes the concept of accountability for past human rights violations that the government denies more than it is prepared to accept. The concept of transitional justice essentially means dealing with the human rights violations that occurred during the war and finding solutions to them. This necessitates revisiting the past and ensuring that the truth about what happened is ascertained. But this leads to two further consequences. One is that those who did wrong and violated human rights or committed wartime crimes are held accountable, which implies punishment, and that those who suffered and were victimized are provided with compensation to rebuild their lives to the extent possible and also to ensure that such violations do not recur in the future. There are two statement mechanisms that have been established for the purpose of transitional justice. They are the Office on Missing Persons, OMP, and the Office for Reparations, OR. There are also two that are missing. They are the Truth Commission and Special Court. The legislation for a Truth Commission is reportedly in waiting but not announced. The Special Court is not yet on the drawing board. In the meantime, the two that have been set up have yet to live up their promise. There are two important measures that the government needs to take for which these two mechanisms can be useful. The first is to meet the need of the families of those who went missing in the war. Some of those who were missing are those who surrendered to the security forces in the last phase of the war. So the government must know what happened to them. Their family members who still are living want to know if they are living or dead. There is a similarity in the government's failure to address this issue and its failure to address the issues of the Easter bombing. In the case of Easter victims, at least their families know the fact of their loved ones. In the case of the war victims, they cannot be sure, even though 12 years have passed since the war ended. They cannot be sure their loved ones are no more. They still hope and believe that the children, husband, or relative may be somewhere. Those who lost their family members wish to know what happened and by whom. Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit and the Catholic Church are not giving up on the need to know how the bombing was permitted to happen. The Cardinal said they will wait to know the truth and they will wait for justice. His statement is applicable to the families of the war missing. The government has to address these problems in a meaningful way in the interest of peace and reconciliation in the country, as they will not just go away. Thank you all and wish you the conference success.
Thank you, sir,
Thank
for
you,
your
sir.
valuable insights. Once a great person said, "You don't change the world with the idea in your head, but with the conviction in your heart." Our esteemed guest for today, Dr. Sagi Sethu, has certainly set this example for us. Dr. Sagi is a seasoned academic leader and international legal expert with unique insights into the theory and practice of law, gained from rich experience in India, UAE, Ireland, and the UK. Currently, Dr. Sagi is serving as the director and program head of Amity Law School, Dubai. She also has 7 years of industrial experience in UAE, having worked in a leading corporate law firm in UAE for 3 years. 3 years as a tutor in University College, Dublin, Ireland, as well as practicing lawyers in India. She has been awarded Doctor of Philosophy in Law from National Law University, Delhi as the thesis paper on violation of human rights by the subsidiary of a multinational corporation, liability of the director of parent corporation. She has completed the Masters of Law, LLM, in International Economic Law with merit from the University of Warwick, UK. She was a recipient of the Ed Estra Research Scholar Award from the University College Dublin, Ireland, and CLPE Research Fellowship from Osgoode Hall Law School, York University, Canada. Besides the teaching and research responsibilities, she is also leading a team of academics at Amity to develop a postgraduate program with an emphasis on international finance law, covering its comparative aspects with the Gulf region and countries. As a member of the university's mooting team, during undergraduate and graduate studies, having successfully represented India in the prestigious JSUP International Moot Court Competition and Europe in Manfred Lach's International Space Law Moot Competition, second runner-ups at the World Finals. She has also trained many student moot teams, which won international and national moot court competitions. Now I would like to request Dr. Sagi Sethu ma'am to kindly enlighten us with the words of wisdom. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Divanshi, for those kind words. Thank you all, respected Vice Chancellor, respected Director Sir, and esteemed guests. It's an honor for me today morning to come before you and talk on a very, very relevant topic. As our Honorable Vice Chancellor mentioned, right now the relevance of United Nations is at the forefront, considering that the war is on between Russia and Ukraine. And therefore, what is the relevance? When a new news comes, usually what happens, the previous news get relegated behind. So this particular international seminar on the relevance of the United Nations post in the Talibanization of Afghanistan in the context of humanitarian crisis that is happening there cannot be ignored at all. Because I feel that slightly the focus that the world has on this has slightly took a step back. And it is important for seminars like this, conferences or talks like this, to have a debate so that this is still in the forefront. So what I'm going to talk today is on how the United Nations can, or what can the United Nations still do in order to rebuild Afghanistan. So, but before all that, I wanted to talk a little bit on what our Honorable Vice Chancellor said in the beginning regarding the security of the nations and building security of the nation. I would like to start my speech right from there, because security, when we talk about security of a nation, any nation for that matter, two security we're talking about. One is our military security, and the second is what we call as a human security. Very important for a nation. The nexus between security and the development of a country is vital. It is actually a close nexus. If a country has to develop, there has to be a security plus development which should happen. If the security is not intact, then it will affect the development. So when we're talking about security, we're talking about two security, military security and human security. Now, why I'm mentioning this is because the second part, which I mentioned, human security. Now, this is one of the most crucial things that should be focused on as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Now, when I'm talking about human security, again, there are mainly four different aspects of human security that concerns a nation, any country for that matter. We're talking about environmental security, we're talking about economic security, we're talking about social security, and we're talking about cultural security. But as far as the country like Afghanistan is concerned, why I'm saying country like Afghanistan, because as everyone, I may not repeat that again, but as everyone knows, when suddenly the whole rebuilding process of Afghanistan stopped, that means 20 years, there was a process of rebuilding Afghanistan post the previous Taliban rule from 1991. There was a rebuilding process which happened. And by the time that 20 years of rebuilding has, in one stretch, it seemed as if it has moved back to 20 years now. So what happens now? What happens to the country as now? So that is why these securities that I just mentioned has to have some focus. Now, the problem with Afghanistan right now is because it's set back to another 20 years, there are certain securities which is more vital than the other. So I mentioned for environmental security, economic security, social security, and cultural security, which together will constitute what you call as human security. Now, if we take a country from like right now where I'm based in UAE, or my own country, India, we have to focus on all these four equally, whether it is environmental, economic, social, or cultural. But for a war-torn country like Afghanistan, right now, the focus cannot be on environmental security. It will be difficult to focus on cultural security. The focus now is more on economic and social security. This should be the focus of that country. Now, when I'm saying this should be the focus of that country, there is a new government which has come in place. And the most important or the challenge that the government is facing is the recognition from other countries. No countries have recognized the new government. And as far as the public, the international law scenario goes, a country is recognized through its government. This is very crucial. And even though the country per se exists, the new government is not being recognized, not even by a single country, because even the Islamic states are reluctant to accept or recognize the new government. So the new government will have to prove itself whether it is worthy of the recognition. Now, here is the role that the United Nations will have to play in. We cannot, as we have mentioned earlier, as Vice Chancellor mentioned earlier, it is very clear that the role of the United Nations has been clear since its inception in 1945, bringing peace and security, developmental issues. It has a whole role to play in that. So as far as UN is concerned, I would say I will come detailed step by step that what it can be doing. But majorly, what the role of the UN only right now, because most of the countries, as we have mentioned or we have been reading in news, have cut their aids completely from the Afghanistan. They have been giving a lot of aid. In the beginning talks mentioned about how there is an appeal of 5 billion, 4.9 to 5 billion has been made to developed countries, and the major contributing countries are, US, Germany, France, etc. Countries are reluctant. So what can the United Nations do? Has it lost its relevance, or is it still relevant in the present day Afghanistan? So here, when I'm talking about relevance of the United Nations, we cannot simply say in one go that it is relevant or it is not relevant. There are about, I would put that into 5 or 6 criteria where the relevance of United Nations will come or has a crucial role to play. And I would start with the first, which is basically the first process that is required, or the first purpose of the United Nations, which is the peace process. So political settlement becomes very relevant here, or the first process that the United Nations is should concentrate on, is building the entire process of peace in the country. Now, while I'm speaking this, while I'm telling this, the news are going on today. Yesterday, I just read today's newspaper when it said, I think about 7 or 8 polio workers have been killed in Afghanistan. Okay, as I'm saying this, as I'm saying that UN is relevant in building a process, 8 workers of polio workers, health workers have been killed in Afghanistan in different places. So we can understand how difficult is the whole entire peace process is. But United Nations cannot wash its hands off there and say that, no, we cannot help them, even though right now they the polio process immediately, because it is the United Nations workers who are involved in this. So for the time being, they have stopped. I'm sure, some solution will come up. There will be talks regarding this. So I come back to the first point that I was talking about, the peace process. How do they do that? The main thing that the UN can do is they can build bridges, or they can ensure that there is a nexus is developed between the humanitarian and the development and the peace, because peace is always linked to the development. Anything that we talk about, what I mentioned earlier about even human security, it is linked to development. So there is a humanitarian issue going on in Afghanistan. The development process should continue. At the same time, the peace has to be achieved. So there is a nexus which lies between the humanitarian development and the peace process. And definitely, United Nations can play an important role in making and having an integrated approach. So it can ensure peace. For that, there is what you call as political settlement, that peace process ongoing on one side. So this is the first level, or the first act that the United Nations can do in order to help achieve peace in Afghanistan post-Taliban government. Second one is that when I'm saying the peace process, the first point that I mentioned is humanitarian. So when I'm saying humanitarian, the second thing that the United Nations can do is bring about a development approach to humanitarian aid. We know that United Nations is requesting other countries to continue with the humanitarian aid, if not for everything. So even though nearly 5 billion was appealed, I believe about 4.6 was already dispersed, billion was dispersed. Still a lot, is yet to come to Afghanistan. But the point is, when it comes to Afghanistan, how is it going to be used? How is the development process going to happen? So the first thing that the United Nations can do is ensure there is food security. Now, if you read the news, it says by 2030, the biggest food crisis is going to be in Afghanistan. This is by the United Nations statement. They say that the Afghanistan will face the most. It's not any of the underprivileged African countries, but the Afghanistan will have the highest food security poverty in the world. So between now, this is 2022 to 2030, when the UN predicts that the worst poverty will be striking Afghanistan, where they can focus is on the issue of food security. So when we're talking about the billions of requests by the United Nations for humanitarian aid, we are talking about providing this to ensure UN can support food security in the country. And how can this be done? In several ways, probably giving access to, for example, small scale industries, or having access to the farmers can be, helped with projects. There are a lot of ways in the United Nations can bring its force, peacekeeping force, encourage the, food suppliers, or help in food procurement. So bringing up food security and thereby giving a developmental approach to humanitarian aid. It is not about the money that is going to be going into Afghanistan. How it is going to be used is going to make a vital difference. And UN can definitely play a major part there in ensuring that this aid is directed towards a developmental projects. And as I mentioned, food security among them is vital. This is the second area. The third one is, again, it is linked to the humanitarian, but how are the humanitarian needs that can be fulfilled by the United Nations? So here also the UN has, there is a fund called the People's Economic Fund, which is created by the United Nations. So why those funds are created is that because the small scale farmers or the small businesses will have access to the fund directly, or some way of easy access. What you can say, we will call it resource mobilization is required. So it is not the fund in bulk which is going to the government, but the UN developing programs such as these, such as the People's Economic Fund, so that the people have access to cash so that their humanitarian needs are dealt with. So this is another area in which the United Nations can, of course, play a crucial role here. The fourth point is another, as I mentioned at the beginning, recognition of this government is crucial. Many countries don't recognize the government. Many means all countries don't recognize the government, including those of the neighbors. Now, as you know how the demography of Afghanistan, it's landlocked, access to Afghanistan cannot be through sea route. So therefore, it is vital that the neighboring countries should be able to help, or the cooperation of the neighboring countries is very vital. So whether it is Pakistan, Uzbekistan, etc., and also a little farther off neighboring countries like, you say India, Iran, anywhere, everybody's cooperation is required. Now, as this new government is not recognized, it is not easy for the government to seek cooperation from even the neighbors. So in that regard, I think UN can play a crucial role in seeking cooperation from its neighbors for accessing through road, because a lot of humanitarian aid like food supplies, etc., are going from India, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, etc. So maybe an increased request or cooperation can be made from these neighboring countries. So here again, the United Nations will play a crucial role here. Now, having mentioned that, as I said earlier, 20 years of setback is happening. It's not on entirety, even though there have been investments which has ongoing. We have all heard how much India invested, China invested, a lot of countries, America invested, a lot of investment has been happening since 1991. 20 years of investment has happened in Afghanistan. So what happens to this investment right now? The industries are there. They have been able to bring a build-in investment for societal capabilities, increasing society's capacities. What it means is that, say, building schools, hospital infrastructure, in health sector, etc., has been going on for the past 20 years. So what happens now? So these investment, these health sectors, they are there. It is not that they have to be rebuilt, but the chances of setbacks are high. The news that I just mentioned now, 8 workers for the polio, this is purely in the health sector, which is going to benefit each child in Afghanistan, has been halted right now because they were killed. And what purpose? Best known to them. I mean, I am yet to read the remaining of the news because I was reading the news in the morning. It just happened yesterday. There is a small hindrance, you can say, there in effectively dealing with health related matters. So United Nations can play a very important or very big role in protecting this 20 years of investment in the state, in how state capabilities were built. So whether it is the health sector, whether it is the education sector, etc. Having said that, at this point, I wanted to, because I mentioned education, it is very relevant to here to mention 2 things. One is the women, because this conference, one of the main technical session of this conference is concentrated on the women rights. I think it is vital to mention UN has, in fact, requested the government to ensure that women are given the education, high school, whatever level education. But there is again a setback here, because earlier Taliban was ready to give beyond the primary education to women, but now it's been halted. Only the first few years of schooling is allowed for women, not beyond that. So there is a whole lot of effort that the United Nations can play here in ensuring that the education of children and especially females can brought to the completion to the final degree or whatever. So the education sector, which have been in the prime highlight, is going to be affected by the stance taken by the new government. And last but not the least, as I mentioned, it is again linked to the recognition. Why? Because of recognition, non-recognition by the state is because there is a lack of trust which happens between the Taliban government and the international community. No country is right now trusting the new government that it will do as it says. I remember we all saw a video where the government officials are mentioning about, yes, we are doing our best, etc. But to build up the trust level right from the beginning, because the world hasn't forgotten what happened to the previous Taliban government, how they ruled the country. World has not forgotten that. So in order to rebuild the trust, UN has a very important role here. UN has to ensure that there is some kind of building of trust which should happen. So how it's not an easy process. It's going to take time. It's going to be a long and laborious process, but it can, the various agencies, United Nations, we're not talking about just the United Nations, we're talking about the various agencies that the United Nations have, whether it is the UNICEF, WHO, anything which any other organizations, sister organization of the United Nations, every crucial agencies have a relevant role to play, and they can help build in this trust level between the international community. So this can be done only probably on a mutually agreeable terms. For example, they negotiate with certain countries, say GCC countries, these are just suggestions that is possible by the United Nations to do. GCC countries, or say African countries or Asian countries, or say SARC, probably they can help negotiate for some mutual agreement to help build the nation. Having said that, it is important that a proper framework is laid down. Without this, these are mere talks. There should be a proper framework. It is not one-sided. Not the United Nations which can do something. From the government side, they have to ensure that there is whatever aid is coming up, it is not diversified, it is not siphoned off to any other areas for their own benefit, but it is used for the purpose for which the aid has been given. It has to guarantee the rights. Now, this is one area which we have mentioned, we have heard mentioning earlier by the speakers, that the rights, what we're talking about, the human rights and the women rights and the children rights, or the child right, what we call, has to be guaranteed. Now, this is a huge ask for the government, since we have seen that in the recent past, they have not been taking any steps pro-women as far as we can see. But there is one, there is a silver lining there. In I think about 2 days ago, there were a month ago, about 8 women activists were abducted by the government, and there was a live plea by one of the activists, where she was saying, she was pleading to the world that please help us, because the officials are outside the door. She said, I can't. But after then, everything was cut, and right now they have been released. So that one thing is like a silver lining, that you can see, okay, at least they have not been killed. Because why? The government seeks recognition at some level. So if they see that people are being activists like this are being murdered left, right, and center, they cannot get this aid, they cannot get this recognition from the other government. So from the government side also, there should be some kind of effort. But as we see today, reading the news today, saying the humanitarian workers, the polio workers, those are health workers being murdered, this is going to be a huge task for the nation, as well as the United Nations, to help rebuild. I will not even say rebuild, because They have been rebuilding it for 20 years. So if it is being set back to protect what is already there, sorry, it got cut. Hello?
Dr. Sagi, there is a network issue with you, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I have no clue where I got stopped. Probably that's a cue for me to stop, that my time is up. And
So,
the
Dr.
internet
Sagi, your
has
time is
warned
never
me.
up. You have given some very relevant points which are there for all of us to ponder. And thank you very much for your ideas. But I would just like to say one thing.
Yes, sir.
While all that you said is implementable, but before that, somebody has to walk in Afghanistan and ensure that the Taliban does whatever you have said that it should be done.
Yes,
So
sir, absolutely,
physically,
absolutely.
somebody has to go there, and some peacekeeping force has to go there. UN peacekeeping force. Use the word force.
The UN has, yes, sir. UN hasn't pulled out and its entirety. They are still maintaining. They assured that they will still be there. So they're not. The UN hasn't given up.
Correct. No, UN will not give up. But the thing is, unless and recognition, this government is not bothered about recognition. They will continue follow their dogmatic ways. Recognition or no recognition. When somebody is doing something by force, the logic stops. That is what Taliban is doing right now. And to put logic back into their minds and to put law and order there, somebody has to intervene with force. Unless that is done, things are not going to move the way that we would like to move.
So force right now, UN will not take any stand on using a force in another country. I mean, 20 years of force has been already been there by. So that for me, I think that's a tactic which UN would anyway take, and it
so right. So
the thing is that economic pressure. Yes,
I request you to kindly wind up because
yes, sir.
Got some other events on.
Yes, sir. Sure. No, I think that is it. Yes, I think I would summarize by saying that UN role that the UN can play is still very vital as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and it's a long way to go, but still government, once it is probably its stance has to change a little bit if it has to fully cooperate in order that the UN effectively plays its role there. Yeah, with that having said, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable insights. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has a cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Major General Rajendra Kumar, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Vishish Seva Medal is an alumnus of ILS Law College Pune and the University of Pune. He got commissioned into the Judge Advocate General Department and superannuated as the Judge Advocate General of the Indian Army. After his retirement, he took over as the Director of Amity Law School. Moving further, Professor Dr. Rakhi Singh Chauhan is the head of the department, Amity Law School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh. She is sincere by every inch and her dedication is beyond reproach. She is always supportive of the students for just cause. As being HOD, she is a very caring faculty and easily approachable to sort out the problems and issues faced by the students. With this, we kindly invite our director and HOD of Amity Law School, Amity University, Madhya Pradesh, for expression of gratitude. Please, sir. Please, ma'am.
Dr. Aki, can you just give how many papers we have received from all over the world? After that, I will just give my short vote of thanks.
Sir, you're mute.
Dr. Aki, may I request you to just inform the guest how many papers we have received from all over the world before I give my vote of thanks?
Sure, sir. Honorable dignitaries, dear guests, dear panelists, and our audience. Traditionally, MTA Law School used to organize a national seminar every year, always in the month of either February or March. But this time we raised our level to international. And of course, it was a need of time to have research, to have discussion, and opening of minds, of course. Because the issues are of global importance. And therefore, we have selected this topic for this seminar, relevance of United Nations in context of Talibanization of Afghanistan and ensuring humanitarian and economic crisis. This topic was relevant not only for the students and academicians of law fraternity, but also for those who are into studies of international relations, political science, human rights, and many others. We are also going to have paper presentations subsequent to this inaugural session in this seminar. For this seminar, we received 248 registrations from India and other countries like United Kingdom, Afghanistan, Germany, Pakistan, and few more. We received abstract in this seminar. Those were about 105 in number. Yes, of course, this number in itself shows that how relevant this topic was for the research. But out of these, few didn't lie in our parameters, and so we selected only 93 abstracts. Researchers are going to present their papers in parallel technical sessions after this inaugural ceremony. For evaluating these speakers in paper presentations, we also have outstanding experts to judge. Those who are renowned academicians, they are experts of subjects. Of course, in this inaugural session, it was graced by Professor Riaz. He is from Sri Lanka. Dr. Sagi Setu from Dubai. They were keynote speakers. Yes, we are missing the presence of Professor Charles. He couldn't join us because of Russia-Ukraine crisis. In valedictory session, our judges will be His Excellency, the Honorable Governor of Uttarakhand, Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh, who is former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, and Dr. Vishnu Prakash, former IFS and Ambassador. We will be giving out the awards of best paper presenters. And now here I request Major General Rajinder Kumar, Director, Amity Law School, to take over the expression of gratitude. So please.
Honorable the Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Riaz Suleiman Lib and Professor Dr. Sagi Sethu and other distinguished guests, participants, HOIs, HODs, registrars, and my friends. It gives me immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks at this moment. I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and the gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. I am so grateful to Professor Dr. Riaz Suleiman Libe, who out of his busy schedule agreed to be the keynote speaker or the chief guest for that matter at our international seminar. And we are so grateful to you, sir, for your kind and precious time for addressing the audience. We are also so grateful to Professor Dr. Sagi Sethu, whom I requested at the last moment to be the speaker at the inaugural ceremony. She spoke so beautifully and cheerfully at this such a topic as she is, and with refreshing clarity. highlighted the aspects which all UNO can do so that the Afghanistan is rehabilitated. We are, of course, missing Professor Dr. Charles Varotto, who is not present here because he is at Ukraine border. We wish him all good health, considering he is in war zone area. We also thank all the participants in this international seminar who would be participating in the technical panel session and forth, for having participated and contributing research papers in this international seminar. We also express a gratitude to all the HOIs, directors, registrar for providing us moral support to organize this international seminar. This is our first international seminar which we organized so that we should be concerned what is happening around the world. It's not that we are concerned about our own country only. Then only we'll think out of the box and we'll take part in international affairs, because law student must know what is happening around. And we teach our students human rights, humanitarian law, refugee law, etc. But they must apply these laws which they have learned here at the ground situation and obtained in Afghanistan. And now it will be another example where Russia and Ukraine, they are at loggerheads, war is going on. So these issues are very, very important. That's the reason we selected this topic for international seminar, so that we teach our students and other participants what is happening around the world, because after all, world has become a global village through internet activities. It's no more a different sort of entity. What affects other people in other country affects us also equally. So I thank all of you. Normally we give this thanks giving address at the valedictory session, but we thought that at inaugural session also we must thank all the participants and our esteemed guests for having spared their valuable time to be with us at this international seminar. We thank all of you very much and we are obliged. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am, for your valuable words of wisdom. Opportunities are like sunrise. If you wait for too long, you miss them. So take this opportunity and give it all you got. With this, we wish all the participants the best of luck and hope this exciting experience will not only broaden everyone's horizon of understanding, but will also leave a lingering taste of togetherness, which will surely find a beneficial niche in your memory. I request all the participants to move to their respective parallel sessions. Good luck to all. Have an amazing and fruitful day. Thank you so much.